investigative reporter for the New York Times, Phillip Shenon. He's written a great book called The Commission about the 9/11 Commission report. Phillip, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. There's a lot to get to because your book has got a lot of very interesting information. Let's start with what everybody's been talking about, Phillip, Phillip Zelikow, and his role as executive director of the 9/11 Commission. We were assured that he was neutral, but having read your book, it appears that he was anything but neutral. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he had ties all over the Bush administration and in the White House, and specifically with Condoleezza Rice. They were old friends. They were friends from the National Security Council in the first Bush administration. They'd written a book together. When Bush 43 is elected and sets up a transition team, Zelikow is placed on the transition team for the National Security Council, and he reviews the operations of the counterterrorism team at the NSC run by a guy who would later become famous by the name of Dick Clark. Now, many of these ties between Zelikow and the White House were known by the Commission when Zelikow was hired. Part of the question is how many of these ties were known about.
And it wasn't just his previous ties, it turns out. When he got on the Commission itself, he wound up having further contact with folks inside the administration in a way that he shouldn't have. So let's talk about Rove and Rice in that regard.
Sure. You know, when Zelikow came on board with the understanding that there was already some suspicion about his ties to the White House, Zelikow promised the Commission that he was going to avoid even the appearance of conflict of interest, and he was going to cut off his ties with these people. But I think it's pretty clear he maintained some of these relationships. And the staff became very concerned when it was learned that Zelikow was having telephone conversations with Karl Rove being a name that obviously sets off alarms in Washington. Zelikow's secretary's logbook showed that there were at least 4 telephone calls to Zelikow from Rove. After this became known about on the staff, and after they expressed some alarm about this, Zelikow called in his secretary and apparently ordered her to no longer log any of his contacts with the White House. The secretary was so alarmed by this that she went to the general counsel to complain.
The details, I think, are even more damning, though, because if they just had calls and you don't know what happened in the calls and you don't know what resulted from it, then you'd say, all right, well, you know what, maybe they were talking about golf or they were talking about fishing. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't believe it, but they could make that argument. But, you know, you go to the section in the book where you talk about how he tried to influence the Commission to make sure that they took Condoleezza Rice's position on the PDB, Bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S.
Well, he mounted sort of a private investigation of his own, and the Commission staffers were pretty convinced that Zelikow's investigation was determined, A, to knock down the importance of the August 6 PDB, and B, to make Rice's account of the PDB sort of the official version that the Commission would accept.
That as if it was a historical document. Now, it wasn't. He was wrong. He pushed for Rice's version, and he looks anything but impartial at that point, clearly pushing the administration line. And then it gets even worse when he tries to insert sentences that try to link al-Qaeda to Iraq, which was clearly against what the Commission had concluded.
Well, that was reasonably early on in the investigation, and over time the staff produced sort of interim reports, and they used to release them at their public hearings. And the staffers prepared a preliminary report on diplomatic efforts over the years to deal with al-Qaeda, and they present this to Zelikow for a final editing. And the report is returned to them from Zelikow, and Zelikow has inserted sentences that appear to try to link Iraq and al-Qaeda. It backs up the White House's claims that Iraq and al-Qaeda were working together. The staff sees this. They frantically insist to Zelikow that all be taken out. There's something of a battle between Zelikow and the staff at this point. Many of the staffers were convinced that Zelikow was doing this to help out his friends in the White House.
Phillip, at this point, I've already got an image of Zelikow, the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, as a total partisan, reading all of this. And then we get to the point where, you know, they have a roster of all the things that Clinton said about al-Qaeda and all the things that Bush said about al-Qaeda pre-9/11. And the way he is adamant in either avoiding it or doctoring it leaves, I think, no doubt as to his partisan roots.
That's really right towards the end of the investigation, and the staff in the final report, in what would have been sort of the clearest criticism of George Bush, was going to present several sentences that they weighed how often Bill Clinton had talked about terrorism in public and how often George Bush had talked about terrorism as a threat in public. And they found that Bill Clinton had often talked about terrorism and George Bush had almost never talked about terrorism, both on the campaign trail in 2000 and after he became president. Zelikow sees this portion of the draft, and he goes ballistic, is the way it's described to me. It was almost theatrical anger, and he insists that all of that be taken out, all of it be taken out, and he goes to the commissioners, and he has it all taken out. And the staff, several members of the staff said they saw it as a pretty blatantly partisan act on Zelikow's part.
Yeah, Clinton apparently called, Al-Qaeda, and I had seen this, the enemy of our generation, and then Bush doesn't even mention it before 9/11. So that gives you a sense of what the facts actually were. But it wasn't just Zelikow. Andy Carter, you describe in the book, and other top Bush aides go to meet with Tom Kane, the head of the commission, and they say, quote, "We want you to stand up. You've got to stand up. You've got to have courage. We don't want a runaway commission." Phillip, what did that mean?
Well, Kane, this is early on before just as the commission's getting underway, and Kane goes to the White House to introduce himself or to reintroduce himself to these people in the West Wing, and they're all scripted. They're all given the same things to say to him. They're told to stand up. They're told that he needs to have courage, and Kane wants to assume at that point that they're telling him to stand up for the truth, and they're telling him to have courage to follow the facts wherever they led. And Kane told me rather bitterly a couple of years thereafter that no. What they meant is have courage to defend the president, stand up for the president. The truth is sort of secondary to that.
There's two other really interesting things that I want to get to in your book, Phillip, but there's many other interesting things. But I want to conclude, looking at Zelikow's role, looking at what the Bush and the top eight said, and then you also talk about how Alberto Gonzales stonewalled the investigation, et cetera. I think a lot of people are asking the question right now as they're watching this. So can we trust this 9/11 Commission report, or was it significantly doctored in favor of the Bush administration?
Well, a lot of the 9/11 Commission final report remains to this day the definitive account of what happened on 9/11. And I'll tell you that, one terrific bit of news for me was the discovery after the 9/11 Commission went out of business and I finally could meet some of the staff members, that the staff was terrific. And the best, you got to credit Zelikow for that. He hired a lot of really sharp people, some of whom were Democrats, to serve on the commission. And those people, over time, insisted that their part of the story and the truth about their part of the story be told in the final report. In some cases, they had to fight Zelikow to get that truth into the report, but it's there.
So let's go to something that was in the report that is very interesting and obviously controversial, and that Cheney and the president dispute. That Cheney ordered the shoot down of the, I believe, the flight that was over Pennsylvania, that wound up crashing over Pennsylvania, and not the president. How did that back and forth go?
Well, it's even broader than that. What happened is after the initial attacks that morning, Cheney issued to the Pentagon an order that the Pentagon shoot down any passenger plane that was approaching Washington. And the vice president does not have authority to issue that sort of order on his own. In fact, the vice president doesn't really have any constitutional authority over the military. Cheney insisted up and down that he had issued this order only after he had talked to Bush and only after Bush had given his authorization for the shoot-downs, that this was all a decision of the president. The commission staff, over time, were convinced that that was not true, that Cheney had issued this order on his own, that he hadn't talked to the president. Bush and Cheney, when they were interviewed by the commission, insisted, no, they had talked, that Cheney had given this order with the president's approval, but the commission had access to an awful lot of evidence to show that that almost certainly was not true.
So the commission does some great work and resists Cheney's, appeal to not put that in the report to some degree. It also is influenced by Zelikow and doesn't put things in there that it should. What's your final analysis of it? Should we believe the commission?
That it's a mixed bag, and I think, over time, I think we're going to find that the commission missed a lot, that parts of its account are not accurate. You know, one thing about the commission report is it has no personal accountability. No human being is really held responsible for any failures before 9/11. And it's still remarkable that to this day, nobody that we know of has ever been fired or demoted because of their actions before 9/11. And I think over time people will start according blame for having failed before 9/11. The personal accountability issues that the commission didn't deal with, other people will deal with.
Philip, I got to ask you about the Saudis. There's a connection to the Saudis that was not reported in the commission. Can you tell us about that briefly?
Sure. The commission, again, to its credit, they had a team of young, really eager investigators who did their best to get to the bottom of this question as to whether or not a couple of the hijackers who lived in Southern California had been aided in some way by agents of the government of Saudi Arabia. And they came to the conclusion that, yes, it appeared that there was some sort of network of Arab expatriate men in Southern California who sort of emerged from nowhere to help a couple of the hijackers. And sort of the principal people in this network appeared to be on the payroll one way or another of the Saudi government. These young investigators wanted to get this material into the final report and raised a lot of questions about Saudi Arabia. They were overruled by the director of that team. This is not Zelikow. This is a very well-respected but very cautious former prosecutor who said that essentially unless you have 100% proof that this is true, I won't put it in the report. And sure enough, it's not put in the report.
So were the Saudis involved? Were those the people that got flown out on a plane? I mean, what did we ever get to the bottom of it, or are we ever going to get to the bottom of it?
Well, it's a very shadowy world. You know, we're dealing with a sinister, shadowy network like Al Qaeda. We're dealing with an authoritarian government like Saudi Arabia. It would be impossible to get to 100% proof of what actually happened. But these young investigators thought that there was smoke that needed to be followed up on. That they thought a lot of questions should have been raised in the final report that weren't.
Now, I've got to ask you one last question that isn't about the commission, but that's in your book. This idea of Attorney General Janet Reno and their FBI reaction to her, and more importantly, John Ashcroft and what he did with this FBI agent that came to his door. Mainly, I want you to explain what it is, but tell me, is it really true? Because if it's true, it's so damning that I can't quite believe it. As a personal flaw in that has nothing to do with something to do with their jobs, but it paints a picture of Ashcroft being such a bad guy that I'm blown away by it. Can you tell us?
He's a bad guy. He's just a peculiar guy, a strange guy who was apparently obsessed, or at least the FBI thought that Ashcroft was just obsessed with his personal privacy. And the story you're telling is that this is well before 9/11. Is that a very pregnant Justice Department lawyer has to fly out to Missouri so Ashcroft can sign some sort of wiretap authorization. And there's a storm, it's raining, it's cold, and the FBI, apparently, this very big, pregnant Justice Department lawyer knocks at Ashcroft's door and hands him the paperwork, and Ashcroft takes the paperwork and then closes the door, leaving her on the porch in the cold and the rain. And she's apparently there for 20 or 30 minutes. He won't invite her into his house.
I mean, get a load of this. The guys who wound up wiretapping us without court orders that violated all of our privacy are so concerned about their own privacy that they leave a pregnant woman on the cold and rain in the porch for 30 minutes. No, that's the one part I disagree with you, Philip. That shows he's a really bad guy.
Well, I'll give you peculiar.
You'll give me peculiar. Well, that's because you're a New York Times investigative reporter and you're sticking to the facts. Okay, but the facts are interesting, and I think my opinion is damning. So, everybody, you've got to check out Phillip Shenon's new book, The Commission. Thank you so much for joining us, Philip.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.